David Brewster here with another Three for All, and this is three Andy Timmons licks from 1992. And of course, Andy Timmons is a phenomenal guitarist, a force to be reckoned with. And I'm sure several of you watching this already know who Andy Timmons is. But I do have a little bit of insight and kind of a history with Andy. And it's kind of a long story, but I'm going to make it as short as possible. Andy's from Evansville, Indiana, and I grew up from Chicago originally, but I grew up not too far from Evansville. And when I was about a junior in high school, I asked my parents if I could take classical guitar lessons. I got really heavy into Randy Rhoads and some Yngwie and stuff. And I thought, wow, I really want to learn classical guitar. It's really exotic and kind of different. And they were totally supportive. They were like, yeah. So they signed me up with an instructor. He's retired now, but Renato Baturi. And Renato used to teach at the University of Evansville. And I started studying with him. And I'll never forget, we started a lesson and he just kind of looked at me and he said, I know you listen to a lot of rock. Have you ever heard of Andy Timmons? And I looked at him, and at that time I really didn't know Andy. I didn't even know his name. And I was like, no, who's that? And he said, well, he used to live here and I used to teach him. And, he plays with a band called Danger Danger. And I had heard of that band, but I hadn't really listened to him. And he was like, yeah, go listen to Andy Timmons. He's phenomenal. And so I made that association. I was like, wait a minute, he's from Evansville. He took lessons with my classical instructor. And then I started to research and kind of dig in, to Andy's music. And, fast forward about a year after that, he did a clinic at Dallas Pro Music in Evansville, which isn't there anymore. But Kevin Book and Jeff Ennis and some of my old, Evansville friends, they were there. And Andy came in. I was still in high school, but I remember I thought, oh wow, I get to meet him and he's going to do a clinic. And he came out and just blew everybody's minds. I mean, he was playing tracks off of Ear Ecstasy, and he sounded great. He was super friendly. He asked every single question. Since that time, Andy actually came to the Atlanta Institute of Music with Shawn Lane. That would have been in 1993, and I was a student there. And I got to meet Andy, got to meet Shawn Lane, and I talked about that briefly in the Shawn Lane Three for All. And here we are talking about Andy, and I'm talking about that again. And then I also met him at Owensboro, Kentucky, Owensboro Music Center. Gordy's, very well respected and a long term, music retail and instrument, salesperson. But Gordy's had a great shop for a long time. But Andy did a clinic there, and I went to the clinic, I saw him, I met him again, and then the very next day I went to the Summer NAMM show in Nashville, Tennessee, after the clinic. And I'll never forget, I was making the rounds and I saw Andy and he looked at me and he was like, hey, I just saw you in Owensboro last night. What are you doing here? And we started talking again. And that's the last time I actually saw Andy. That was years ago. That was a while ago. That was like 10 years ago probably. But anyway, Andy is phenomenal, great player, packed with all kinds of great ideas, cool licks, cool phrases, and some really good music. I just shared that image, with some kind of recommended listening from Andy Timmons, and he's appeared on a lot of other albums too. His Sergeant Pepper tribute, and kind of an instrumental Beatles tribute to Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. That's a great album. I caught that. I thought, wow, he's playing Beatles, instrumental and really doing it justice too. But those are just some kind of recommended, albums or whatever that you can kind of hear him play. And some of you, probably are aware of Ear Ecstasy. Ear Ecstasy is a great, instrumental rock guitar album. I love that one. But then if you go all the way back to 91, when he was working with Danger Danger, extensively, the album Screw It from 91. Most people don't really remember that album. It had some, attention. I think people were listening to it. It was definitely, kind of popular in Japan and some different areas, but it didn't really explode. It wasn't one of those like Slippery When Wet kind of albums. It was kind of a minor hit, definitely, a big hit with the fans, but it didn't really break the band open. But I know for a lot of people, that's probably the first time they really heard Andy play, was on Screw It. And so I located a bootleg from Japan for this lesson, and we're gonna look at some licks that he played with Danger Danger way back in '92. So here we go. The first lick here is this kind of tap bending melodic idea, and it's really cool. It kind of reminds me of Vito Bratta a little bit, because you're melodically tapping with bends. And then there's kind of this like quick run in a higher position, and then it ends with this little, kind of bluesy phrase. But it sounds like this. You can see right there, we're basically starting, I guess you could kind of think of like the A minor pentatonic box. We're grabbing that G, we're going to bend that and release it a whole step, kind of a bend and release like this. And then while that's bent to A, you're actually going to tap the 20th fret right there with your right hand. And then you're going to release the bend. And then you want to tap the 20th fret, when the bend is released. And then while you're, kind of sustaining that note with some vibrato, prepare, for a big position shift, because now you're going to basically come all the way up here where you've got this 14, 16, and 18 on the G, and then 15, 17, and 19 on the B. And that's just A, B, C sharp, D, E, and F sharp. And then he kind of dips the bar on that F sharp. I don't have a bar here, so I'm just going to kind of do a little bend, kind of a pre-bend, and kind of sneak the sound of the vibrato in there. Then he basically comes back there, E to D. And then he kind of finds a way to end it there on A. Really cool lick. Here's another lick from this live footage I found, and we're still in the key of A, and it starts with this melodic phrase that's kind of sliding around, and then it finishes with this kind of mirrored, like, octave tapping, which is really cool. But it looks and sounds like this. So slowly, we're basically doing, we're going to hang on this C sharp and bend it up a half step and back. So there's the first half. And then you're basically going to move over to the B string, and you're playing F sharp and A right there, and then you're going to mirror that with tapping. And it's a tricky little lick, It's unusual for sure. Really cool. The next lick comes from the solo to the song I Still Think About You, and I've always liked this lick. It caught my ear, early on, and I caught him playing it, during this live concert, and I thought, yeah, that's a cool lick to break down. So he's basically doing hammer-ons off the open G string, but then the pattern of notes and kind of the melodic phrase changes as he ascends. So it looks and sounds like this. So slowly, we're going to pick that open G twice, and then hammer on to D, and then grab E right there. And then you're going to play the open G, and then D, E, F sharp. Open G twice, and then F sharp to G on the B string. And then the open G once, F sharp G to A on the B string. And then you're going to do that again up here, where you're on the open G, and then 16 to 17 on the G, and then 15 on the B. And you're going to grab that D note, go back to C, and then bend that up to D. Or something like that. Really cool lick. Alright, so in the live concert footage I found, there really wasn't, a giant, Andy Timmons guitar solo. But if you watch that concert, I mean, he's like a flamethrower or a monster. I mean, he's just prodding through the whole concert, killing it, rhythm wise, lead wise. I mean, he's just on fire the whole time. Like, man. And there is kind of like a solo, but it doesn't last for very long. It's just kind of an extended intro. And that's where this lick comes from. This is kind of a bonus lick. Now I really like this lick, and he's kind of hanging on that major third and bending it to the fourth. And then he starts kind of playing with that bend and also adds a hammer on pull off there between 10 and 12 on the B string. Something like that. And then he starts doing a speed lick right there. And the trick there is obviously you want to start slow, but then you want to play it as fast as you can. And then he basically just kind of goes a little higher in the scale right after that. And then he starts descending through the scale. And he kind of hangs on that G sharp, bends that up a half step and releases it. And then he kind of finishes with a Hendrix lick. Kind of like Steve Lukather there at the end too, a little bit with that bend. Very Lukather inspired there for sure. That's going to wrap this look at 3 licks from Andy Timmons. And of course, Andy has been a huge influence of mine. Aside from obviously his music and his guitar playing, phenomenal. But then just the association, with Evansville, and I took classical guitar lessons from the same person that he took classical guitar lessons from. And it just really motivating and inspiring for me at a young age, and it's continued to grow and kind of push me, in my career. So thank you, Andy, for the great music and inspiration. And you've, every time I've met him, he's just been so, friendly and nice. And it's crazy, because he's the kind of player where, he'll pick up a guitar and just melt your face off, and just shred and play, unbelievably. And then he'll turn around and shake your hand and sign autographs and talk to you like a real human being, which is kind of rare. The whole rock star ego trip is completely gone from Andy. I don't know if he's ever even had an ego. He's so friendly and warm and, really nice guy for sure, and a phenomenal musician. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it. Thank you.